get brilliant on the basics first, right? Get somebody who will take your vitamin levels, your mineral levels, and take them off and run. I mean, I think that's first and foremost. There's so much, you talk about sleep. So much of sleep can be shorn up if your zinc levels and magnesium levels are better, right? Like so much of that, as well as vitamin B6. And so, yeah, I mean, don't ignore the basics. Become brilliant. Like you said, sleep hygiene is critical. So start there. At least get that. Have an understanding of where you fit in those things. Shore those up first, right? Like take care of those. Make sure your vitamin D status, all those things.
All right, so let me give a little intro right here, Daniel. I usually don't do this with somebody sitting here, but I'm gonna try to mix things up a little bit today. So,
all right.
So you're gonna listen to your intro and feel free to correct me with anything that I mess up. So today we're joined by one of the few people, and this is what I love about you, man, that you have seen the supplement industry from both sides of the table. Daniel Fabricant served as the FDA's top dietary supplement regulator before becoming CEO of the Natural Products Association, the nation's oldest and largest trade organization representing the natural products industry. Few people understand both the science and the politics of nutrition better. How'd that sound, bro?
Wow. I mean, hey, look, I got to, between that and what my dog thinks of me, I got a lot to live up to, but I'll do what I can,
Well, it is, you do have a fascinating role. And I think it's one that probably a lot of people don't even understand. Before we hit record, we were talking about DC, which is where you reside, it's where you are, and how basically in this day and age, if you're not in politics, then you're probably going to get, it's kind of the old cliche. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And in this business that you and I both play a part in, that's definitely the case. So let's just kind of I want to start with the origin story because yours is such a cool story. NCAA athlete, you're linebacker, right?
I was a kick returner and receiver. Yeah.
Okay, so fast white boy for the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah.
But you look like a freaking linebacker, dude. You're jacked, and you look like a linebacker. That's probably why I thought that.
No, I appreciate that. You keep it in the gym. Got to stay in the gym.
There you go. And then so you go and you end up becoming a professional researcher. You go from academia into the regulatory environment, now to basically the trade association world. So kind of give this audience an understanding of your trajectory of how you became the CEO of this organization.
Sure. And this is my second trip to the organization. So I was a chemistry major, which I used to have. The football team's academic advisor used to tell me I took classes that were a little too difficult, but I still made the honor roll and everything. And it was helped boost the team GPA. So I was proud of that. But I went to a PhD program in Illinois. I was lucky enough to study under a guy who was one of the most well-known scientists in studying plants and chemicals from plants. Ideally, he discovered a number of cancer drugs with different research teams and things like that from plants. So that was my focus. And then after my first year, we kind of shifted into the new category was created, dietary supplements. And there was there were a bunch of interesting research projects at NIH, and we applied for them. We got them. We had the largest at the time. It was the largest research program for women's health and dietary supplements back in the mid 90s. But my advisor, he was on in age, and he's no longer with us, rest his soul, a great guy. But he was like, look, I was involved with all this stuff before. I'm not going to DC again. Here's a plane ticket and get to know what's going on. Talk to this person in Congress, talk to this attorney's office, and get that understanding. And so when I graduated, I came to DC. I actually worked for Consumer Lab for a time. It only lasted about 10 months because I didn't like their business model, but that's another story. We can delve in that direction. But then I started the trade association. They were looking for a chief regulatory person, and given some of the background I had at University of Illinois, they threw me into it. In addition to doing the science, they kind of threw me into it. So I did that for approximately 5 years. And then the CEO that hired me, he left for greener pastures. And it wasn't I disliked the CEO, it's the job at FDA became available. And some friends were like, you really have a unique background with the academic and the industry. At the time we had NPA, it was an NNFA, had the largest GMP program in the industry, first third-party GMP program. We went in and looked at our different manufacturers and how they made product. And so at the time, I mean, I was probably one of the few people in the country who'd been in thousands of facilities, right? And seen, and so that was really helpful to my development. It was really seeing kind of, okay, where's the direction direction of the industry going? Where's the trajectory? I think in those times, especially, people thought that people were making products at their kitchen table. And granted, there might have been a few of those, but by and large, it was, it was very, very technical, very scientific. So did my time at the agency for about 4 years, and we did some cool stuff. Brought some precedent cases, some things that were, and again, law enforcement is interesting. I mean, it was fascinating to me. I guess I always kind of, as a kid, I guess I played a lot of cowboys and Indians because I always kind of, but you learn kind of the principles of law enforcement and what needs to happen, and how you get more people to be compliant and to follow the laws. And that was really, that was instrumental in my background. And then, I felt like I had done a lot at the agency, and the association called and said, hey, the CEOs we had didn't work out, and we're looking for a new person. And this is, we want you to be here. Now, I'm but a small portion of the arc of the association. Our association, this is its 90th year. It goes back to 1936. So, that's the funny thing, Jason, is people have been fighting for healthier ways of living since 1936.
This episode of The Healthy CEO is brought to you by Authentic Health, the supplement company dedicated to helping you build a strong foundation for long-term health and vitality. At Authentic Health, every product is designed with one goal in mind: to protect your cells, support your body's resilience, and help you thrive in today's challenging environment. Whether you're a busy executive, entrepreneur, or simply someone committed to living well, their foundational supplement stack gives you the edge you need to stay at your best. And because you're a listener of The Healthy CEO, Authentic Health is giving you an exclusive discount. Just go to www.shopauthentic.health.com and use the promo code JASON at checkout to save on your order. Take the next step toward a healthier, stronger you with Authentic Health.
It's crazy, man. That's crazy. And that's one of the things. Okay. I want to, on the FDA topic real quick, because it's one of those things. I guarantee the listener here, every single person listening to this, they conceptually understand what the FDA does.
Right.
Although, and sometimes they hear the good, the bad. Like when we went through the whole pandemic, there was probably more talk about the FDA and figuring out kind of, okay, what are they regulating? What are they keeping us from being able to use as a therapeutic, whatever. But you walk in as a researcher, your academic hat on. What were some of the things that surprised you when you walked through the door of this mammoth agency that does play a critical role in health and wellness? What were some of the things that kind of surprised you about it?
Oh, wow. It was, I think that the biggest thing was there were some really great dedicated people, and there were a lot of folks who were just punching a clock. And I think that's probably true throughout all of government, but I don't think until you're there, you see it. And I also was surprised and there were some people at the agency that wanted me to shake things up, but I think there were an equal amount who didn't want me to shake things up. Right. And so that was always concerning, because it's like, hey, we swore an oath, we have a job to do. It's a public good, public trust. And there were some that really wanted to see change happen. There were others that said they wanted to see some change happen, but they kind of didn't really behave in that way. So that was an important lesson for me. And I guess some of it was surprising, some of it wasn't. But I think, I think by and large, for me, it was, similar to you, Jason. I like to tinker, right? Like, so I was like, hey, these laws are here. I think this means we can do this. Let's see if we can do this. And we did. And so it was good for me, because you had critics, everything from the American Medical Association to, our friends of the Consumers for Science and the Public Interest, and those Center for Science. And they always say, well, yeah, it's an unregulated category. There's nothing that can be done. FDA is powerless. And it's like, not even close. I mean, the agency has some really, we're a country of laws. I mean, that's one of the cool things. And just getting to know the agency and the history of the agency and kind of the creation of the agency was really to inspect and test, right? Both foods and drugs. I'm not going to touch the drug center because that's a whole nother issue. But at least for foods, dietary supplements, that's the most people want to know. Everyone wants to feel like, hey, the plant this food came from was inspected. There wasn't any bacteria there. There were no sanitary problems. And, especially for dietary supplements, hey, someone making sure if this thing says it has 100 milligrams of vitamin C when it goes out the door, well, darn it, someone needs to check that. And I think that that's what people want. And the agency does a great job of that. I mean, that was the coolest thing when I was there, too, was the interaction with the people in the field, right? The people went out, the people, all politics are local, right? We were joking about that last time we had lunch. Same thing for your FDA is local, right? Like if you have a facility in, whether it's Idaho, New Mexico, Texas, Georgia, Florida, you want that inspector there. You want that inspector to know that you're doing things the right way.
100%. Now, one of the things that I think we saw a lot of, kind of going back to what I said earlier about during the pandemic, and that's where the FDA was front and center along with all the agencies that had to do with anything health related. When did you ever see, and maybe you have an example, or you can just say, yep, saw it, and let's move to the next question. But did you ever have to deal with politics getting in the way of science? I think that's one of the things that a lot of people listening to this now, we get frustrated about is just general consumers, because everything gets politicized. We talked about it earlier. I think that, and we'll get into this, I think with some of the physicians that push back on functional medicine, integrative health, and some of the more natural pathologies and therapeutics that you and I totally believe in, I think a lot of it is because it's almost like they're taking a political stance versus a stance on science. So were there ever times where you had to go to, where you saw those battles where it's like, hey, this is science versus politics, and in the end, when that becomes the case, it seems like the American public loses? Were there cases like that you saw?
Specific to COVID, I mean, let's start there. Like day one of COVID, we had to, and we were lucky. We had some friends. I don't know if you know Mark Short. He was Mike Pence's chief of staff. I knew Mark for a long time. Me at the time and the lobbyist for GNC, Romano Romani, we got a hold of the White House first thing and said, hey, the industry is essential. You had states basically saying, no businesses can stay open, no supplement stores can stay open. Some grocery stores had some hours, but, we were looking at a total shutdown as an industry, both federally and statewide. So the first thing we did was work federally to get that, to move that ahead. And luckily, Mark was very responsive and got us to be essential for Department of Homeland Security. And so kudos to him on that for the entire industry. And then we had to work state by state. And, the notion that the feds and the states weren't interacting at that point is kind of silly, right? Because you'd think a place like we did pretty well on keeping the states open. So Nevada, Colorado, and Massachusetts shut everything down, right? Mass was probably the toughest because Massachusetts even shut down gun stores. So if they were doing that, we knew politically we were just behind the eight ball. So, but that was only a 2-week shutdown. Colorado was a limited shutdown. We went to the governor there and were able to get things open relatively quickly. I think it was a couple of weeks. Nevada was funny. Nevada was a different story. The governor at the time was Steve Sisolak. And, the bodybuilder Jay Cutler.
Of course, yeah.
He actually helped us go viral because we had grassroots campaigns to hit the governor's office and make phone calls. And, we got under his skin as your, that's your First Amendment right. So please, everyone, when those situations arise, make use of it. But there was a Dairy Queen open in a strip mall in North Las Vegas, but Cutler couldn't open his gym, and the supplement store that was selling smoothies two blocks down couldn't open either. So he's, Cutler's there every day taking pictures and videos of the Dairy Queen and then the gym being shut down. It's like, so you really want people to be healthy, they're going to go to Dairy Queen. So, and look, every now and again, who doesn't love a good Dairy Queen sundae, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, the pandemic, it was everywhere. And then you dealt with, I think the bigger problem was this, some of the folks at FDA now were at the administration first go around. We were really, vitamin D status was the second biggest cohort for morbidity, right? People with low vitamin D, you saw the most, the greatest number of COVID deaths outside of basically, their age and relative health status, right? So it was, that obesity and then vitamin D status. Now, we couldn't say that, we politically, even though it would have been of great public health benefit to say, hey, everybody, especially those of you in northern climates in the wintertime that aren't going to get any sun, you need extra vitamin D because for viral load, and it makes sense, it keeps your viral load way down. And that's the governing factor. But we couldn't even say that based on, politics, the law, what have you. But meanwhile, people are politicking for this, that, and the third to get an emergency use authorization. And so, yeah, it was unfortunate. We also, the bigger fight we were part of, a lot of people were part of, the Biden administration wanted OSHA to check companies' vaccine records. Now, we have companies that manufacture finished products, and they have, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 employees in one particular plant. OSHA has a hard time looking at their eye wash stations. Now we're going to have OSHA in their facility full time looking at vaccine records. Come on.
Right.
So luckily that was fought against and won. But politically, it was like, I mean, that was crazy. I mean, you had pretty much every slice of industry from gas and oil to food to dietary supplements, health and wellness, medical devices to, even some of the defense manufacturers were in on that lawsuit going, OSHA, we're going to have OSHA look at this. So yeah, it's unfortunate. COVID really showed how political some of this stuff gets, and that's been the great thing I think about this administration so far. You know, and not everything everyone wanted has come to fruition. At the same time, the discussion is, hey, people want control of their health and wellness. They don't want to, they don't want to turf that to the government and go, hey, tell me what to do. And so I think that's been great for everybody.
I could not agree more, man. And I think that's a perfect segue into what I want to get into now, because I think that, you and I grew up probably, either through athletics or even outside. We're in the gym, and we were probably, I don't know about you, but I had a subscription to Flex magazine when I was a kid, So all the old school bodybuilders, I used to watch Lee Haney's workout early in the
There you
morning
go.
on
Yeah.
ESPN.
ESPN, yeah.
Right. And so, so we knew about creatine back when it was just a kind of a bro supplement. And now it's one of the most, kind of cornerstone things in most people's supplement protocol. But a lot of people listening are just they're new to the game, and it's overwhelming. I mean, it is overwhelming. One of the things that we talk about a lot in my nutraceutical business is, hey, we're trying to help eliminate that wall of supplements in your pantry that you don't remember why you have it. You don't know why it's there, and you may have just wasted some money. It's just such a massive, massive black hole that you can jump into whenever you start looking at supplementation. But more and more people are willing to take that step, because I think, Daniel, more people are taking agency over their health.
Yeah.
And as someone who eats, breathes, and sleeps this business from a scientific standpoint and also from a quality standpoint, talk to this audience about some of the misunderstandings that you see constantly with supplementation, kind of, and take that into kind of what I touched on earlier, where physicians are getting it wrong, why some physicians, and you see, I mean, I almost sometimes when I'm talking to a doc, that even though the doc you can tell might have a pot belly and doesn't live right and probably doesn't know anything about getting good sleep or red light therapy, and they're telling me, yeah, supplements, that's just, expensive urine. And I'm like, I'm going to listen to you, and you had less than an hour of nutrition in medical school. Okay. Talk to the audience about some of the myths and misconceptions just surrounding the supplement industry as a whole. And then I want to take that into how we help this audience make better decisions whenever they start searching for their own stuff. So take it from there. What are some of the misunderstandings that people have?
I mean, we can have a whole separate program on that, but I want to start with, you brought up creatine, which is near and dear to my heart. We've had in the past 10 years, 20 states introduce age restrictions on things like creatine, anything for muscle building or weight management. That's, a consumer, a supplement that, because there are still people, unfortunately. And yeah, you brought back a good memory for me. I remember my sophomore year going to the weight room, and they had the drink machines that kind of swirl around. And it was like they had Gatorade, and this time they were putting creatine in it, and everyone's workouts got better, but you still, unfortunately, because of, and you touch on physicians, and we'll give them their due in a second, but unfortunately, you still have the message out there that, well, the industry is unregulated, and creatine's a steroid. And it's like, wait a second. I mean, those are the things that I think are incredibly problematic, right? Is outside of, and also the other thing is there's no science behind it. Outside of salt, sugar, caffeine, creatine is probably the most heavily studied food ingredient on the planet. I mean, if you go to, and it's not just true for creatine. I mean, so many of the ingredients that are in supplements, I mean, you touched on it really well. Like what you said is, okay, did somebody just see a news flash on something that might be beneficial and buy it versus actually check the research? If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, which is just a record of the clinical trials in the US that generally either go through NIH or university sponsorship, there's over literally 60,000 of them specific to supplements. That's not even including, like, I'm sure there are products with creatine. There's probably creatine gummy bears in there that wouldn't even hit that if you just looked up supplement research. So I think that those things are incredibly important. And we'll circle back to that, because I think that's a big part of how we help the audience here. But yeah, the notion that there's not regulation, and the states have helped promote that too. And a big part of it is the states, I think, the number now, I think, is 47% of people that serve in Congress here in DC served in a state house. So if you're some guy and let's say you're on the health committee and, in Rhode Island, and you go, well, wait a second. Every time I pick up the paper, there's a story on supplements, or oh, it's high school football season. There's a story on creatine. Let me introduce a bill on creatine, and you know what? And they get more attention than they've gotten for anything else, right? And so people, what was the RFK saying is if you have a health problem, you only have one problem, right? Like that's it's, and so I think people have gotten smart to that, and unfortunately have twisted it in a big way for political purposes, back to kind of the early part of the conversation. But yeah, the misnomer that the industry isn't regulated, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, the adverse event reporting system is the exact same for drugs that it is for dietary supplements. The GMPs are, there's about that much difference in the GMPs. While we don't go through phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials prior to going to market, there is a pre-market safety check, that you can't go to market without. If it's a new ingredient, you've got to submit that to the agency. So yeah, there's just so much misinformation out there. And this week, the American College of Physicians launched into a position paper where there's like, there needs to be broad sweeping reforms. And it's like, you nailed it. When you see a doctor, not only do they not look the part, but you get 8 minutes with them. And from previous visits, I'm sure you had a doctor once upon a time ask you, Jason, so Jason, what else are you doing for your health? And you start to go, okay, well, I've been lifting more, so I'm taking creatine. And I would bet dollars to donuts that doctor said, creatine, that stuff's going to kill you. It's going to lead to, it's going to poison your liver or kidneys. And you're literally sitting there going, wow, is this guy out of touch, right?
Yeah.
And instead of engaging you in that, instead of going, wow, so why do you take it? What are the benefits you get? What brands are you using? No. And so they've guaranteed that, and supplement use has grown from in 2000, in 1994, when the industry kind of came in as an implementing category, there were about 1 in 4 Americans use a supplement, to now it's almost 3 in 4 use a supplement every day. So in a 30-year period. And a lot of the reason that's happened is because of, really because of exactly what you spoke of, is the doctor doesn't look the part. The doctor doesn't have, and isn't interested. I mean, that's the other piece, is it's like, how can you not be interested when everybody you're seeing in your office is using it?
Oh, let me tell you something, Daniel. I had surgery performed it's been 2 years ago now. And the physician was like a younger guy for a doc. I mean, he's probably around mine and your age. And so I thought, and he I knew he did some stuff outdoors. So I made the assumption this guy knows something about, functional health or whatever. And he was first of all, it started when he was telling me about back pain and some things that he had, some tweaks in his sciatic or something like that. And I was like, hey, have you done any red light therapy? And have you done anything to manage the inflammation? Knew nothing about it. So that was kind of fun. I was like, oh, well, let me tell you about this. Well, then I had 2 surgeries from this guy. And the first surgery, I'm getting ready to go in. I'm in pre-op. He walks in to check on me. And the first thing I said was, how was your sleep last night? And he just goes, quickly. He's like, yeah, I never sleep. I get maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. And I'm like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? And I was like, well, I'm not the guy you want to tell that to,
Right.
And I'm like, you're a freaking doctor. You're a surgeon, and you're a good surgeon. And you are clueless about the benefits of sleep hygiene. It blew me away.
Yeah.
And then to another point, one time I was at one of my physicians, and this is something we could talk about too, is because my primary care doc no longer practices primary care, because who wants to do that? Because of what you said.
Right.
A lot of the reason why those 8-minute visits happen is because they're insurance companies and the federal government is mandating that they have a fee for service business. So they're just kind of cranking people through instead of actually working through with you. So she finally said, I'm out. But I remember one time, she was like, golly, you're talking about how well I was doing my blood work and all this. And she said, have you been going to the gym a lot? And I'm like, really? That's what you think that this is? I'm 51 years old and have a VO2 max over 50, and you think it's just because I'm hitting the gym,
Right.
and I'm going to give her some grace, because it's like, that's not unique. Now, I will say this, and this podcast has proved it. For example, I think the last episode I recorded of The Healthy CEO, I had a doc in North Carolina. He's in Charlotte, named Will Haas. He's a younger guy. He's a little bit younger than us. And man, he came out of medical school. And one of the first things he did was he was alerted to this. He saw it. He's like, when he was in medical school, he noticed, we don't talk about nutrition, and
Yeah.
that's important. And now he has come out of medical school, and of course he's way out now, but his whole practice has always from day one been about functional medicine. And one of the things I talk about whenever I'm in DC and I'm representing my foundation, which is kind of what
Yeah.
brought you and I together, is I'm like, I want to make primary care great again. And part of making
I like
primary
that.
care and family medicine great again has everything to do with implementing these sort of things we're talking about. It's
Right.
it's exercising the agency we have to take control of our health and maintain health, as opposed to just, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm ill. I'm sick. I've got hypertension. I'm going to go see the doc. And so I'm going to go seek sick care instead of constantly maintaining for health care. I'm hopeful that we're going to finally, with guys like you and what you're doing, and that some of these physicians will latch on and we'll get better as a country in taking care of ourselves. At least that's the hope.
Yeah, and there's been some movement in that direction, right? Back in, was it April or March, HHS got 40 medical schools to agree to increase the number. Before, the average number of nutrition hours in the medical school curriculum was 16. They got
Yeah.
increased to 40. Now, it doubled. I think that's great. But to your point, I just still don't think that's enough, right? So I think part of the thing we push, and we're going to send a letter to American College of Physicians, and I'll share it with you guys as soon as we send it, is just go, look, engage with us. Like, if you need to educate doctors about supplements and how the industry is regulated, we'll lay it all out for you, and the requirements and everything else. And here's what, and also, if you guys want to go see a facility, how many doctors do you think have actually gone to a facility that manufactures dietary supplements? I would guess it's zero. I don't, but the irony is they've probably gone to zero that manufacture drugs. So you go, like, what is it they actually understand in that regard, and how do we bring them to that level? And so, yeah, we're going to engage on that. I'm lockstep with you there, Jason. I think that we've got to, we can't just beat them over the head about it, but the notion that they understand, like, that's the thing, right? It is, you and I are already in the advanced course when it comes to how to apply this to your day in, day out healthcare, health and wellness. And they're behind. And I understand the reasons they're behind, but that doesn't, hire a team, hire a nutritionist, hire a dietitian, heck, hire some guy from your local gym who looks the part, who
Yeah.
can give you, I mean, right? Something that simple,
100%.
Yeah.
Now let's help this audience out, because I mentioned it earlier. They do have a lot. I guarantee you they're on some subscription or something. They've got all this stuff piling up in
Yep.
acrylic crates in their house. Let's help them become better supplement consumers. So let's just start in the online sphere. I mean, where you can buy peptides and you can buy all kinds of your favorite podcast hosts, Signature, Stack, and all that. What are some of the things that people should research before? I want to take this two ways, because I want your science hat and I want your quality control hat.
Sure.
So if I'm an individual and I decide, I've listened to the Healthy CEO and I like what Jason and Daniel are talking about, and I'm still taking Flintstone vitamins like I did as a kid. That's the only thing I'm taking, and they taste great, but I want to up my game. What are some of the things that person should do from a personal, individual health standpoint to decide what kind of supplements they should start taking? We mentioned creatine, any other, which I think is a universal one, right? There's some of those universal supplements. And then once they've decided and they figured out kind of, here's how I decide how to make something bespoke for my health, my age, all the things I want to do, then where do they go? How do they vet one of your members that is selling the supplements that are nutraceuticals that they have decided they want? How do they do that? So kind of put all that together for this audience so that they can go become a better consumer.
Sure. I think first and foremost, and we touched on earlier, find someone in healthcare who has some understanding, who will at least take your get brilliant on the basics first, right? Get somebody who will take your vitamin levels, your mineral levels, and take them off. And I mean, I think that's first and foremost. Is so much, you talk about sleep. So much of sleep can be shorn up if your zinc levels and magnesium levels are better, right? Like, so much of that, as well as vitamin B6. And so, yeah, I mean, don't ignore the basics. Become brilliant. Like you said, sleep hygiene is critical. So start there. Is at least get that, have an understanding of where you fit in those things. Shore those up first, right? Like, take care of those. Make sure your vitamin D status, all those things are where they need to be. And then you got to be honest with yourself. And if that physician or healthcare practitioner or if they're a DO, if they're an ND, whatever hat they wear, really take an honest evaluation of yourself. Are you someone who's got, about 10% of the population some sort of gut challenges right now in the country? Now, some people think that's due to food quality. It may be. I think it's just due to the overall American diet. We're overfed and undernourished. But you've seen so much research in like the probiotic space. So understand like where you may fit in the probiotic space and try to figure out what aligns with your lifestyle, what aligns with, what strains may align research wise with what you're dealing with there, and the gut is critical, right? We hear about gut brain axis all the time. It's almost been done to death, but I think that's a critical piece. And I think when it comes to the gut brain axis and looking at where to go, um, there are a few ingredient manufacturers that have sponsored most of the clinical research. Now, their ingredients make their way into different branded products. Instead of following the money, follow the clinical trials, right? It's like you've got companies, and this is spirit of full disclosure. Two of our board companies are very significant in probiotics, Novo Nessus and Kerry. Kerry's one of the oldest Ireland dairies and oldest dairies in the world. So they know a little bit about probiotics and milk manufacture and that sort of thing. So, and they've got they've got hundreds of clinical studies on probiotics. So follow those. Now, they don't make a finished product, but they certainly, those ingredients, those strains go to the finished products. And if those line up with your needs, and again, work with the doctor on those needs, go for it. You touched on peptides. I really like peptides, but not all peptides are peptides you can take through your mouth as a supplement, right? Some have to be injected. Some of the ones now that people are taking through their mouth that have to be injected are you're just buying fancy amino acid powder, right? Which, hey, look, amino acids are great, especially if you're in the gym 2-3 times a week. You need those, especially at our, let's say mature stage of things in our 50s, but yeah, don't just say, okay, I heard some guy saying, I've had 2 ankle surgeries, right? I used Achilles was pretty rough, but used some of the newer technology, some of the shockwave therapy to rehab them. And there's one friend of mine's like, you really ought to try BPC 157. He's told me, yeah. And he told me about an oral form. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, but I don't know that it works orally. And I haven't seen studies that say it does. It may, but those are sorts of, certainly seen studies showing that the site injections work and everything else. So those are the sorts of things people want to consider. FDA is going through the machinations on how those should be regulated. But I think when it comes to peptides clearly can fit in both categories, right? I had eggs this morning. There's thousands of peptides in eggs, right? And some of them are getting absorbed, some of them aren't. Some are just, getting cleaved by the stomach and turned into individual amino acids, and that's fine. But I think, because it's emerging, I think you really have to stay on top of things, which, that shouldn't scare people either. I think nowadays and I don't say AI is perfect. AI hallucinates a lot and things like that, but screen things. If you have a why, right? Like I said, I had an ankle injury, so that was the why people brought the issue up to me. Whereas then you can start to screen things. Don't just go for the trends, right? Like you hear about certain things, you go, oh, wow, that sounds trendy. I want that. That's kind of really get to, it's funny. The concept of personalization, whenever you're looking at health and wellness, it's always, well, we need studies on multiple different people. Yeah, we do. But at the end of the day, it comes back to you and what is it you're looking to accomplish. And so shore up your basics, have a why for everything, look at the research and find somebody that you can talk to about this. There's so much information out there, and sometimes that'll lead to analysis paralysis. But look, like you said, if you've got things that, no different than if you had clothes accumulating in your closet you weren't using, don't use it. You're clearly not motivated enough for the why or have a reason enough to use it. And the motivation isn't enough. You've got to be disciplined. Like you said, creatine's one that, the recent studies, women, back when you and I started working out, women were like, no, I'm not taking creatine. I'm going to get big muscles like a guy. Well, the past, I don't know, 15, 20 studies on creatine, 2/3 of them were on women dealing with things like memory function, mood disorders, things like that, and have shown a tremendous benefit. And so you go, hey, maybe some of this, but really keep an eye on the research, work with somebody who can help you. And now when it comes to working, what brand, right? That's the question I always get. Who's good, who's not? I almost feel like a car salesman sometimes when I get that question, right? But I think a lot of it is, of course, people are always going to gravitate to what appeals to them, but listen to the messaging, listen to the story of the company, right? Unfortunately, there are some people out there that say, hey, if a company tells you they're the only ones that can do the science or the only ones that have the science, run, right? Like that's kind of conversely, if a company says we don't need the science, run, look at folks who have, who have some skin in the game, who are involved, who are invested, the people that are talking to you. Heck, look at the people who come here to Washington, D.C. That there's plenty of people in the industry in every part of health and wellness, whether it's red light therapy, supplement industry. There's plenty of people in that industry. How many of them are actually investing their time, their treasure to come to DC and push for good policy, right? Not politics, but push for good policy. I think those are the folks you want to gravitate towards, those folks that are getting in, I say that selfishly because that's what we do. But if you're buying supplements from somebody who doesn't have a member of Congress visit their facility routinely or things of that nature, or then you kind of have to scratch your head and you go, are they really, do they really want to be, are they just buying real estate in the neighborhood, or they want to be part of the community?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
And
I think that's great advice.
yeah.
Well, and I know that just a shout out because I mentioned to you, Daniel Powers has been on my podcast, whose family is the founder of Orthomolecular, and I know his dad's on your board. I mean, I think yeah, exactly. And I think just going through your board members list, like researching your trade association, they're not going to take the time and, to your point, and spend the money to do what it takes to truly make change in this industry. And that's a cool thing. That's why I brought you on, Daniel. It's like, there's not going to be some shady Chinese operation that's just trying to sell crap on TikTok that's going to also be on your board. So I think that's a great way to vet. Now, one of the things I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, just because it's been such a hot topic through this Trump term and everything, is the MAHA movement and Kennedy. We touched on it a little bit earlier, and I actually had Hannah Anderson on the show, who went from being Kennedy's deputy chief to now running health policy over at AFPI. So, I mean, she's kind of like the guru of policy regarding MAHA. Just from a macro standpoint, what are some of the things that excite you about MAHA? But also, because she and I covered this, like, what are some of the things that concern you about this movement? Kind of from both sides. What are you thinking with regard to the whole Make America Healthy Again movement?
The coolest thing in all of it has been, this is the first time in the history of HHS we've had a secretary of HHS who has prioritized food, right? Like because it's usually like, okay, we're going to look at drugs, we're going to look at, because it's a big job, right? This is the first time we've had someone go, look at us. Like, we've got access to every drug in the world. It hasn't increased, the lifespan is flattened since we've had that, right? And so you go, I like that, common sense is a gift, right? I think this is it. So I like that. And I think that that's going to stick, right? I think that that's really the critical thing, is like, hey, we have to make how we eat and the guidance from government important, because I love what they did with the dietary guides and the pyramid, right? It's like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we probably need to cut down on the refined flours, carbs, everything else. Like, yeah. And I think people like you and I, we have lunch, you throw some red meat and some greens on the table. That's it, right? Like, and however, I think if you're someone who doesn't have access to that or hasn't made it a point, and also it shifts the conversation for the next generation, for the younger people, because they may be thinking, oh, hey, no, I'm exercising, I need to eat more of this refined grain or more of this. And it's like, no, you need to get X amount of protein a day and so on. So I think that's one of the great things, and that's going to stick. I think there was a lot of optimism. There was a lot of progress. I think that's the other thing, is sometimes when you're an outsider and you walk into DC and you're like, no, we're just going to keep it outsiders. And this, you're a part of the furniture here, just like me. But, and while we do have somewhat of an outside approach, you have to get inside, right? You can change more in the system from the inside than the outside. And, some of the stuff that's going on right now, like I know, like, for example, we talk about probiotics and there's so many studies on benefits, but if we go by some of the definitions floated by some of those in the MAHA camp about an ultra processed food, all of those probiotics are ultra processed. And it's like, guys, That's not helping the government, right? So some of this is very, very, it's incredibly technical. Putting my research hat back on, my FDA hat, it's incredibly technical, and I understand the upset at ultra processed food that are making America obese. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I mean, you can make an argument that whey protein, and I had my whey shake this morning. I'm cutting weight right now, so I had my whey shake this morning. You can make a case that that's an ultra processed food based on some of the guidelines, and so you go, okay, so some of these things we can't just demonize everything. We've got to be very specific, very targeted. And I think the folks are getting there, but again, here's the other side of it. MAHA we're a year and 8 months in, right? I mean, and I know the mainstream media just wants it to fail. Like, they not only want it to fail, they want it to fail for RFK, and then they want to flip it over and make it into like, dare I say, the other side's initiative, right? Like they're waiting to fail for him so they can pick it up, shine it up, and go see all the good we did, right? So which tells you there's some value there, and I think that that's important. And look, health is a nonpartisan issue as far as I'm concerned. So I think everybody should be supporting looking at these things and getting them right. Is okay if we're going to make whey and ultra processed food. That's a problem, right? So how do we ensure like we're not cutting off things that we like and instead of having these broad sword, and I get it, some people are upset and they want to cut with a broad sword, but on some of these things we can't do it. We got to be surgical.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you what, one of the things and I have people from both sides of the political aisle and completely politically agnostic come on this show and my other podcast, the Jason Wright Show, which is more generally topic. And when we get on this subject, I always say, I don't care where you fall on RFK. I don't care if you saw the Instagram video of him grabbing snakes with his bare hands, which clearly freaked me out, dude. I'm not going to admit, wow. And you think, yeah, see, the guy's crazy. The bottom line is we're having conversations at the national level at HHS about, to your point, food as medicine and nutrition in ways we've never had before. I mean, and it's been so long. It's been the same for so long where we're like, yeah, you got to get three meals a day. And then if you, you mentioned it, you look at the old school food pyramid and you're like, a lot of that crap you and I aren't even going to put in our, now we might get some extra grains if we throw some of those biscuits on the table from the Occidental in DC, but for the most part,
guilty as charged.
Right. For the most part, though, we're just going to stick with that amazing filet and some greens, but those biscuits are pretty freaking amazing. But that's the thing I love about what's happened with Kennedy is that we're just having the conversation. And I think, again, like we said earlier, I think a lot of these physicians, man, God bless them. They went to business school. They went to medical school. They started to practice and they just kind of got in this lane. And a lot of them are now going, maybe I should check this out. Not all of them, but there are so many doctors. In fact, JJ Virgin, who is, I've been on her husband's podcast, and they have an entire seminar that they hold like 4 times a year for physicians who want to make functional medicine a part of their practice. That's what they want to do. And it's so cool to see that change is happening. And I credit a lot of that with the whole MAHA movement. Yeah. I'm going to be in October out in Puerto Vallarta with Lee Aaron Keneally, who is out in California, one of the OGs of functional medicine. I mean, I think Lee Aaron was a cardiologist by training. Yep. But she started practicing functional medicine way back when everybody was calling her kind of a wacko. And well, now she's one of the leading voices in this stuff. And so I do see the change coming, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to RFK in the halls of power, in the halls of policy and regulation, saying, hey, and dude, I'm going to steal this, Daniel, getting brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
That to me, that's what this is. This is getting brilliant. And so when a PhD who can swim way further out in the ocean than I can tells me, hey, buddy, just learn what the heck to do to survive while you're on the shore really, really well before you go swimming way out to the horizon, I'm going to listen. So get brilliant on the basics. And I think that's a lot of what Kennedy has done. Yep. It's just said, hey, why don't you see what's in your food? That's
right. Right. And really take a look at I think there's been some cognitive dissonance with the diet and with supplements too. I mean, I think you touched on it. There are people who are multiple supplement users and don't really have a why, and it's like, have that why, make sure, we're talking about, here's the thing, right? We always tell people We don't sell magic bullets. My members don't sell magic bullets, right? This is not the magic bullet industry. This is a lifestyle change industry. This is, you want to give yourself the gift of eating better, working out more, and filling those gaps with supplements, or enhancing your performance with supplements, with like things like creatine and what have you. So that's a different mentality than, hey, well, I'm going to take this and it's going to, make me instantly healthier. That's not, this is it's a reap what you sow thing. Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, RFK gets a lot of credit for that, for, again, saying, hey, a lot of this is common sense. And can we get back to that platform? People weren't meant to eat 10 servings of grains a day, right? I mean, that's, so let's turn that pyramid upside down and, see what shakes loose. And I think it's been, like you said, the fact it's in the vernacular now, the fact people are talking about it every day, that's not going away.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, well, now let's look into the future, man, because you get to see and talk to a lot of these companies and your board members and
Sure.
folks that are the members of the association, that they're doing some cool cutting edge stuff. And as a matter of fact, I had a guy, Ari Tula, who is a founder out in the Bay, and they started making these gummies that were basically custom gummies for their individuals. So, and a lot of the lot of the ingredients for I guess the dosages, well, I guess for that matter, the molecules that were going into the gummies were driven by AI from wearables. So basically, you get your blood work done, you have a wearable that talks to Elo Health, which is his company, and so your monthly supplement is going to be bespoke for you and your needs, and it's going to change. If you're training for a high rocks or something like that, then it's going to pick that up and change it. So as you look at it, and that's just one cool thing to mention, but I know you get to see a lot of this stuff. What is like the future of supplementation and some of the cool things, and where you see AI, wearables, and some of these things playing a role in the future of this industry?
Well, and I think on the AI and wearables, I think you nailed it. It's all about the personalization. And AI, we're really only still on the first, or some say second generation of AI. So as it gets better, those products are only going to get better and really more tailored and more specific to. I mean, the cool thing is, you take the AI and the wearables, and then you take, if you will, the rise of local distribution, right? You may even come up, I would envision in a short time, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, where overnight, you're wearing your wearable at night and you don't have to say anything, but a specific supplement for that day gets delivered to your door, right? Like that's that, I think we're getting to that point, and you're seeing shifts with a lot of the electronic platforms. I mean, they're really pushing for more local. Now they can't carry everything, but like you're seeing you are seeing somewhat smaller sizes at more distribution centers, so they can get them out. Like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little run down. I need vitamin C for the next week, and you can have it at your door within 10 minutes. So I think that's driving a lot of commerce right now, which is good. But I think the cooler thing is, and private equity has been a bit of a challenge for the industry, just because I think they aren't really investing in, like we talked about, kind of the politics. Unfortunately, for better or worse, you're trying to keep numbers down. I get how the game's played, but they don't want to invest in the political side. I think for the industry, what has to happen, and we're involved in some of it, is we had a company here visiting us at our office yesterday. They make lutein and zeaxanthin, which are necessary pigments for the eyes. It pushes off AMD. Bausch and Lomb has done a bunch of studies at National Eye Institute on an AREDS formulation. AREDS formulation delays advanced macular degeneration. Those two pigments store in your eye, so if you don't get them from the diet, you're not getting them, and you get AMD. AMD is one of the fastest growing conditions in the country, partially because of the aging of the population. So we're really looking at, and been working with CMS and HHS, how do we model that versus, they give a shot in the eye called Vabysmo for people with AMD now, and it delays the onset of AMD. The thought of a needle in your eye, Jason, I imagine, isn't too high on your list of things to happen. The cool thing is, and all things being equal, let's say the treatment response for Vabysmo and the supplement are on par, right? Or even the supplement, let's say it's 5% diminished. The cost savings, that drug for a year costs through CMS, which are reduced numbers, about $8,000. The supplement supply for a year is $150.
Wow.
So like that's where we need to, that's really, I think, for the industry where the future lies is how do we tell those, that's it. The macular degeneration is a clear story. It's almost a deficiency story, right? Because where are people going to get this orange pigment from? We know the diet's pretty bad. Every time I go to the grocery store, you look in the produce section, there's always extra bags of carrots, unfortunately, there's always some extras. Look,
Yeah.
so, building that back out, where are people going to get this pigment from? And so, I think that those sorts of things, the industry really needs to coalesce around and move things forward. For example, we pushed, we got some language this year in the Milcon VA bill funding that to have creatine available, at any sort of VA service centers and things like that. So, not just because we think these guys are still building muscle, but it helps with sarcopenia if they're losing muscle in advanced age, and then all the other benefits, neurological, what have you. So, these are the sorts of things I think really are the future. Yeah, the technology is going to drive that part of it, right? It's always going to drive that part for people like you and I at this stage that are like, hey, I'm trying to squeeze, every last bit of ability out of myself, right? And that's a big part of what we do. But the other part is really is really reducing risk, right? And how do we quantify that reduction of risk? And it's amazing. For a country with the First Amendment, we only have 8 full health claims at FDA and 14 qualified health claims. Now, you can make structure function claims, but the fact that you've got so many claims and you've got so much science that the government isn't bothered to look at and go, you know what? And not everything's going to be an A, Jason, but heck, if you got B's and C's, a lot of people, that's going to be a game changer for. So let's start moving in that direction. But again, that goes full circle. Like you brought up orthomolecular and Gary. I love Gary. I love those guys. Yeah, get to DC, drive the policy, invest in, be part of the community. Don't just be, don't just buy a land on the block, but be part of the community and, get to DC and know your Congress people. Yeah, I mean, I can, the Congress people in Wisconsin are at Gary's facility frequently. They know what's going on. They know how it's made, and they know that they're focused on being like. I'm glad you're going to steal. I stole being brilliant on the basics, so feel free to steal it from me. But yeah, that's one of those where I think there's so much we're just scratching the surface on, and can change lives with it.
Well, and I know you didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to tell you because I'm a big, and when you've been self-employed for a lot of years, then you understand the value of trade associations. And, one of the things that we remember, and this is, folks, this is how it works. If you remember the Got Milk campaign, that wasn't just because out of the blue, someone at HHS decided, you know what, we need Americans drinking a lot more milk. What that was advocates and lobbyists representing the dairy farmers of America or whomever, and getting together with their trade association saying, hey, this product is good. We're going to make sure everybody knows it, and putting a lot of resources behind it. That's how this works. And Daniel, your trade association, anybody within an earshot of my voice, if you're in the business that I'm in, like I've told Daniel, I mean, as a co-founder of a nutraceutical company, I'm going to be involved because there is no creatine lobby. There's nobody out there that's just, hey, Congressman, you got to know about creatine. No, there's professionals like Daniel walking into offices saying, hey, let me explain to you the science behind these molecules and why they need to be a part of the national conversation. And by the way, let me just tell you about the most researched, and you're right. I had Dr. Jose Antonio,
Yep.
probably the leading researcher on creatine for over 30 years. And he said the exact same thing you said. He's like, other than caffeine, there probably is no more researched supplement
Yep.
than creatine. So this is how so get involved. If you're listening to this and you're anywhere in this space, you need to be involved with Daniel and his organization. All right. So here's what I want to, now I told you I wanted to talk science, I want to talk supplements. I think that you freaking crushed all that, but now I want to talk to you as a CEO, Daniel,
Sure.
because this is the healthy CEO, which by the way, I mean, folks, could I get a better avatar? I mean, he is a healthy CEO of a healthy health, in the health industry. This is awesome. So here is a little CEO rapid fire. And I've never done this before. So you're the first. All right. All right. Coffee or tea?
Oh, wow. Definitely coffee. Definitely. Though I do like my herbal teas, but not, yeah, it's a different, a big chamomile tea guy in the winter. I don't know why, but big chamomile tea guy in the winter. So,
all right. Do you have a certain coffee that you like the best?
oh man. There's a few local brew shops here. I'm a big cold coffee. Even in the winter, I'm a big cold brew guy. I
Yeah.
just I like the taste better.
Yeah.
I'm a black coffee guy too. So
Okay. I'm a big
yeah.
coffee guy too. My
Yeah.
wife and I, coffee is a staple of our diet. All right. Most underrated supplement.
Oof. Boron.
Boron. Okay. All right.
Boron. Yeah, the studies on boron, especially for men in our sector, tremendous. 3 to 6 milligrams a day will really do wonders for not just hormonal profile, but bone density, bone strength. It's helped me. I still compete jujitsu. I swear it's helped. I started using boron regularly about a month and a half ago. And you always have connective tissue issues in any sort of combat sport, and it's helped tremendously.
Love it. Most overrated supplement.
Oof. You know, uh, probably, all due respect to Dr. Oz, he's a friend, but the whole raspberry ketone thing was a bit overdone.
Yeah.
I think ketones have a tremendous value, but the raspberry ketone, for some reason, that just wasn't. Yeah, yeah. That a lot of hype. It not a lot of a lot of sizzle, not a lot of meat behind it. But sorry, raspberry ketone people.
All right. So, what is one food everyone should be eating more of?
Oof. Probably I'm a fermented guy, so I have, I like my not for the taste, but I do like the sauerkrauts. You even got a fermented relish now that's chopped up. It tastes like, there's a shop here in DC we'll go to one time. They're like gourmet hot dogs are really nice. They use the Kobe beef, Wagyu beef, what have you, and they have like this. It's basically this fermented cabbage they turned into a relish. It's wonderful. But yeah, so yeah, I like my fermenteds. Yeah.
I'm going to hold you to that, brother. I
Are-
used to do that. And I'm glad you said that. I've gotten away from it. I used to keep good sauerkraut in my refrigerator. And it was literally, I'd take a dose. I mean, I wouldn't put on, it
Yeah.
was just literally a spoonful in the morning. I think I learned that from Tim Ferriss years ago and started doing it. And I've gotten away from it. So I'm going to,
Ironically, it's an old bodybuilder trick. I learned from a guy growing up in South Florida where he couldn't stand apple cider vinegar. I'm not a huge fan of it either, but I'll reluctantly do the apple cider vinegar. But yeah, the sauerkraut because you get the vinegar. It's like
yep.
you know.
Yep. Exactly. All right. I'm going to get that back in my protocol. All right. One thing Americans need to just stop eating, just stay away from. If you had to say one, what would it be?
Oof. Man. Oh God, that's tough because there's more than one. I think I'm gonna take a different spin on this. Is if you're gonna have a sweet, make sure it's no more than 200 calories worth of a sweet.
I like that. I
You
like that.
know,
Yeah.
I think that's a biggest part. Like, look, I mean, everyone ate a Snickers bar when they were a kid. I swear they just keep getting bigger. Like those sorts of things. It's like, I certainly steal my kids' Halloween candy. I limit myself to like, a few of the mini Reese's pieces, and then I'm out. Right, like mini Reese's cups, because I think that's really, I think that's even more important than look, if you make it into if you make it into such a forbidden thing, eventually I think most people, now there are some people that are hyper disciplined are going to break, but I think most people, they're like, if you tell them no 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 no, they're gonna want to do it.
Yep. Could not agree more. All right. Now, this is one that everybody loves, and especially somebody like you as a leader and somebody that's in health and wellness. Just kind of give us a rundown of what the morning routine for Daniel Fabricant looks like.
Sure. Well, today. So I try to get on the mat 2 to 3 days a week, usually once on the weekends and once during the week. So today was my day to get up on the mat. So this morning, got up with the pup at 5:30, gave him his salmon. He had salmon, blueberries, and sweet potato. So he does pretty well. I throw some ginger and pumpkin seeds in there too. That's good for the dogs, right?
He's definitely the star of your Instagram.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's a
That dude
funny
gets
one.
treated better than I've got. Now, I've got a pretty pampered pup downstairs too, but I think yours takes the cake, brother.
Yeah, all
He lives
Hampton, but
well.
he lives well. So did a walk, sent a couple of emails, and then went off to train. Was on the mat by 7, off the mat by 8. Got today we didn't. He wasn't so rough on me today. We just learned some new positions, but let me tell you, Sunday was rough. Makes my ears pretty, I guess, or something like that. But then had a meeting on the hill. Grabbed a cup of coffee, cold brew. Took care of that. Then came back here for the podcast. This afternoon, I'll meet with some of my outside lobbyists. I've got some member prospects we're talking to. Somewhere along there, I'll squeeze in lunch. As you and I have a fairly similar lunch, it'll either be chicken, salmon, or a steak, some greens. Try to stick to the water every now and again. We'll throw a glass of wine in there, depending on, how DC is amazing, right? It's like you get to meet so many people, and you've got so much history with so many different people that you're always kind of reigniting the flame, which is cool. So there's been a lot of that, especially in the summertime and election year. Some of this slows down. So then just have a few more calls, few more emails. Probably like you, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 emails a day. Not all of them are readable or ones I have to get back to, but you got to filter. And then tonight there is a fundraiser. I will do my best at the dinner. Usually most of the dinners now, the fundraisers have gotten really sharp. Generally you get 3 options for dinner. Usually get a fish, a vegetarian, and a beef. So pretty easy to either get, a piece of salmon or a piece of sea bass or a steak and do that. The desserts, like I said, I'll have a bite of desserts, but generally I'll have 2 bites, and then you gotta push that thing away, or you're gonna get in trouble. So yeah, and then try to hit the rack 10:30, 11. That's roughly it. Make some time for, whether post dinner there are gonna be people hanging around, so sometimes for socializing you got to have that. That's the other key piece too. I think now, and I've loved our conversations, I think now it's really easy to get caught up that you just need one person for all your needs in your life. No, whether you're a guy, you got to have your boys. If you're a girl, you got to have your girls. You got to have, you got to mix it all up. And I think that's the cool thing about, especially like your podcast. There's so much good information out there now that you really have to approach things with, I've got a sign. I've got 2 signs on my wall. Growing up in Miami, Jimmy Johnson, we always went to his football camps as kids, and he had a saying, don't be tired. His thing was tired. Being fatigued makes everyone a coward, so don't be tired. And you go, wait a sec, don't be tired. That's crazy. But eventually it kicks in. And then the other one is the old Walt Whitman quote, which is be curious, right? Always be curious. And so, we try to stick to that.
I love it. I love it, brother. Well, I'm trying to do the same thing, man. And this podcast does help me a lot with that, because I stay pretty isolated. I'm kind of a recluse, man. Like I told you, I'm up here in my
I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a minute, dude.
And dude, I'm telling you, I am an introvert disguised as an extrovert. It's crazy. But this podcast, and like you mentioned it, meeting you and having other guys to connect with really helps me, and I'll tell you what really kind of scared me into it. And it's kind of sad. There's that Harvard study that Albert Brooks is always talking about, that like socializing and having friendships is like one of the keys to longevity. Again, brilliant on the basics. It's not a pill. It's not some crazy workout. Just socialize. I'm trying to get better at that. And so that's why I'm grateful for our friendship. And I want to, we got a lot of stuff we got to cover in the future. And then also, this is okay, totally off topic. You mentioned it though, Jimmy Johnson. So Jimlin and I, for the 4th, we went to this resort right outside of Park City. And the day before we leave, we're kind of packing up, and Catholics versus convicts, 30 for 30 came on, brother. The classic. Yeah. I was like, I'd seen it before. Yeah. But I'd forgotten just how living through that era and remembering the Lou Holtz Notre Dame era, back when Miami and Notre Dame were becoming that big rivalry that they shut down. And dude, that was such a magical time for college football.
It was great. No, and I grew up a Hurricanes fan. Obviously, was Tar Heel. Got to play for Mac Brown. Mac was great. Lou recruited 2 kids from a high school, so it was kind of funny. He recruited South Florida pretty heavy back in the day, and got to meet Lou Holtz, and it was he was just astonishing when you looked at the guy. The guy was maybe all of 5'8", maybe weighed 150 pounds, but I mean, that guy, he was an intimidating figure. But yeah, Jimmy was hilarious. It's Hurricane football certainly shaped the current landscape of college football. It's funny, but no, you brought it up. It's a community thing. I mean, that's the thing. Certainly you've got, everyone's got their relationship with their significant other, and, you got to keep that healthy. But yeah, like I said, you're building communities here with this. So I'm grateful for you for doing that.
Well, brother, I appreciate you being a part of it. Daniel, this has been awesome, dude. Thank you so much for coming on The Healthy CEO.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Anytime.
All right, brother.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.